Good afternoon and welcome to today's UK Column News with me, Mike Robinson and Malcolm Massey. It's Thursday the 30th of April, just after 1 o'clock, and the weather in Plymouth is what, sunny?
Grey, overcast and cold.
And sunny?
Sunny in bright spells, I suppose,
yeah.
if you could call it that.
It's as sunny as it gets anyway. Lots of people around the country saying that it's similar, except for in Birmingham where it is raining apparently. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so we are going to start, of course, with Tom Crawford, because tomorrow is the big day. Tom is in court, and really delighted to see the Nottingham Post covering this, although I do question their continuing insistence of using, pointing out that he does have cancer. Tom absolutely doesn't want that fact to be part of this campaign. That's not part of this campaign. The main part of the campaign is the fact that the Bradford and Bingley defrauded him in the sense of changing his mortgage without consent and without any kind of signature or any kind of notification. They acknowledged that fact by sending him some flowers and some champagne, which is very nice of them. But what they didn't do, which wasn't very nice of them, was to sort out the problem. And so they still claim that he owes £43,000. And he's in court tomorrow to sort that out. And of course, the Post also posting this yesterday, photographs from the last protest outside Tom's house. And just as a reminder then, everybody is meeting at Ye Old Trip to Jerusalem pub or inn or whatever it is in Nottingham, pretty close to the train station. People are starting to arrive there at 9 a.m. and there's all kinds of stuff going on. Now, of course, I don't know what that is because I'm not privy to it. The organisers know what's going to happen. And very similar to Birkenhead, we will just go with the flow, as the saying goes, and go where we're asked to go. And on the Saturday then, just a reminder that the latest showing of the Great British Mortgage Swindle will take place at midday in the Savoy Cinema, if you want to go along to that. So I hope everybody that's watching this programme, or as many people as possible, are coming tomorrow to support Tom and support the work to restore common law in this country. And are you going?
I won't be going to this one, no, unfortunately.
Oh.
That was a conversation killer.
Right. Okay, anyway. Right, let's move on. I know I never want children, so why can't I be sterilised in my 20s? What is going on here?
Yeah, an interesting set of few articles, actually, that I'm going to show you from the Mail today. I spend quite a bit of time reading the Mail, which is quite a sad part of my job here, which I often regret. But anyway, the point is that the Daily Mail runs these constant articles, either pitting women against men, or in this case, they're running really what we're talking about is a population sort of control sort of articles, really. I'll just read you a couple of inserts from this article. I'm not going to go too much into it because they're not massively interesting articles. They're just opinion pieces. But this woman's obviously expressing a desire to be sterilised while she's in her 20s. She talks about her mother having a sterilisation after her, and she recounts on how miserable that was and how horrible it was having to bring them up. She's never had as a result of having children, the mother never had any money or freedom, and she missed out on all these wonderful things in life, and she felt trapped by the choices that she made. Of course, there's no mention in the article about all the great things about having children, and the privilege of actually, having the responsibility of raising a person who's going to then grow and contribute to society and so forth. She then goes on to say that it's really unfair that the NHS refuses to sterilise her because she's in her 20s. She mentions that it costs about £1,500 if you go private, but she believes that because she's a journalist and she pays her taxes, she has the right to get the NHS to basically sterilise her. I wonder whether this piece is actually to encourage people to start thinking about sterilisation, especially young, maybe would-be sort of, and I use this word very, very lightly, and I know it's going to probably spark a little bit of, sort of controversy, but feminist, across the word, sort of encouraging them, that this is perhaps something that is in their power. Because if we go on to the next slide, we have, obviously, the article is littered with these sorts of pictures and so forth, and we have bits and pieces about contraception and so forth, and there was even a video on the article about how contraception works and so forth. I have to question why this sort of article is in the news, just because it's not news, obviously. It's an opinion piece. If the lady felt so passionate about it, you would imagine she would go private, because at the end of the day, it's not a requisite to be sterilised, not a need. It's a personal choice, which of course is her choice.
But it seems to be one in a whole. I mean, if you look back over the last 2 or 3 years in the Daily Mail, and particularly the Daily Mail, but other newspapers as well, there's been a whole swathe of these types of.
Absolutely.
It's really expensive to bring up
Yep.
children. You
Yep.
don't really want to do it.
Yep.
Why not? And this is the latest one. So
Yep.
this is the latest one. Takes it the next step. Why not get sterilised on the NHS?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And, like, as you said, it's focused on the drudgery rather than the actual privilege. The next slide really is just from the same paper, from the same day. It's really just enforcing this sort of idea that pregnancy is a terrible thing, having children is a terrible thing, because, as Amanda Holden is now constantly telling us, she'd be dead if she tried to have any more children, because having children is so dangerous and so forth, and et cetera, et cetera. This is really, I think, sort of underpinning the previous article, which if people read my sort of weekly nudge articles, I'm very much interested in the way in which media uses these sort of opinion pieces to persuade us to think a certain way. And finally, I picked up this slide from The Guardian, which is again from today. And it's about, basically the Pope has just come out recently supporting women's equality, which again I'm all for. But the writer of this article suggests that in order for the Pope really to get on board with the sort of feminist movement, he has to now start promoting reproductive rights, which I think is a strange way to talk about contraception and abortion, which is really what the writer is suggesting, is that he really should be promoting contraception and abortion if he's really interested in women's rights, because women can't have equal rights to men if they have the right to bear children. Strange position, I thought, for the writer to take, seeing as she's a female, but again, that really is her, that's her angle in this article. So what's this about? Just very briefly, of course, it's about Agenda 21, it's about population control, it's about encouraging us that we shouldn't have children. We don't want children because they cost money, they take up lots of precious time in our lives, and they cry and they whine, and of course we're going to miss out on all these wonderful things, such as working harder, doing overtime and all those so forth, that we couldn't do if we have children. Blatantly, they're nudging techniques. These are not news articles because, as I said before, they're not news. There's nothing news about it. It is just people's opinion pieces and opinions trying to sway younger generations that having children is not a good thing.
Now, you did mention your series of articles, the Weekly Nudge. Tell us a little bit about that.
The Weekly Nudge is really looking at articles that appear in the sort of paper, not necessarily specific articles, but looking at the ways in which we're being nudged towards particular ideas. Over the last sort of few weeks, I suppose technically it's been a month because I've been working a lot, unfortunately, so I haven't been able to keep up with those articles. But over the last sort of month, I've really focused on transhumanism. There's a few articles in there that are maybe a tad bit controversial for some people, because I'm talking about sexuality and the way in which that sexual sort of movement over the last 60 years is basically gearing us towards a transhumanist agenda. Last nudge I covered was dealing with certain organisations such as the Tavistock Institute, Wilhelm Wundt, people who are like, and of course, Edward Bernays, and that really people who sort of started up psychoanalytics. And then I'll be following that up with an article next week to do with the various techniques which are used in media to basically nudge us towards particular opinions that those that wish to control society want us to take.
Well, if you want to have a look at Malcolm's articles under the Weekly Nudge banner, if you look at the front page of the UK Column website, on the right-hand column, there's a featured series section, and it appears in there, so you can click on that and see all Malcolm's articles. Right, moving on, constitutional reform, a big issue for us, and this is University College London. This is senior academic figures specifying standards for a post-election constitutional convention. And what they're saying here is, today a group of senior academics published a statement setting out a minimum standard for a post-election constitutional convention. Several of the political parties are now committed to establishing such a body to discuss the constitutional options for the UK following the Scottish referendum. The Labour Party manifesto promises a people-led constitutional convention. The Liberal Democrat manifesto, a UK constitutional convention, and the Greens, a constitutional convention led by citizens. And it's interesting that the Greens are talking about one world as well. So it goes on to say the other parties either support or are prepared to contemplate establishment of such a body. Now, this to us is extremely dangerous because, of course, their intention is to throw out our common law constitution in favour of a European-style jurisprudence type constitution. Now, the Constitution Unit is, according to them, is an independent, non-partisan research centre based in the Department for Political Science at University College London, and the Constitution Society, is an independent, non-party education foundation. It promotes public understanding of the British Constitution. No, it doesn't. And works to encourage informed debate between legislators, academics and the public about proposals for constitutional change. We totally disapprove, really, of the activities of these organisations because they are absolutely pushing the constitutional reform agenda and falling into the trap of the European and United Nations agendas in particular. So we don't really like what they're doing. Now, the Constitution Society, what a constitutional convention needs to succeed, I have this here. And they've got eight major points. They're saying a focused and manageable agenda. They're saying appropriate territorial representation. They're saying a citizens' majority. So citizens randomly chosen from the electoral register will be invited to participate. And then they're saying phased deliberation. So what they're saying is that, first of all, there'll be a learning phase where the members of the public that are there and other lay members will hear expert opinion. Now, I'd like to know who they're going to choose as experts for this. Is it all going to be from the Common Purpose agenda, or are they going to invite John Bingley, for example? Are they going to invite Mr. Lomas, Bob Lomas, yes, and other people that have been historically experts in the field and, in fact, were running the Magna Carta Society for many years? These are the questions that I have about this. I suspect I already know the answers, and unfortunately, it's not a great situation. Absolutely, clearly heading towards a major constitutional reform. And in light of that, then the Local Government Association today, a couple of days ago, this press release saying that UK council leaders unite in devolution call. And of course, what the councils are wanting is more devolved power from central government and more money from central government. And it's really pretty unfortunate because, as we have been pointing out for the last couple of days, Common Purpose absolutely embedded in local government and in the Local Government Association, in fact. Unfortunately for them today, it's really pretty unfortunate that their head of human resources, so this is the guy that hires people into the Local Government Association, has been arrested on suspicion of the distribution of indecent images of children. It was amazing that within minutes of this article appearing and within minutes of the arrest, his LinkedIn profile was already removed from LinkedIn. And so it's very difficult to get any kind of background on this guy. But what we can say is that he has a history of working in other councils. So Tony Smith, head of human resources at the Local Government Association, lives in Brighton, paid £70,000 a year for that job. And he, in the past, has worked for West Sussex County Council, the London Borough of Greenwich, and the London Borough of Bromley. In fact, in the London Borough of Bromley, he was working as a senior education personnel officer, so he was choosing teachers, or at least working in that area. So, a pretty nasty situation there, and we will watch that story as it goes. And please, if you still haven't read this article and don't quite understand what we're talking about here, please have a read at the Nottingham Common Purpose Effect on the UK Column website. Also, have a look at the Rotherham Common Purpose Effect, because really we're pointing out how people are being protected by the local authorities, by the police, and we're really pointing out the links between these people and what they have in common, and Common Purpose is it. Right,
Mike. You mentioned people-led constitution. If you just backtrack a little bit.
Yes.
What do you think is meant by people-led constitution? Do you think it's like a people as in general people, or do you think there's particular people?
No, I think they're going to make it a popular thing. So they're going to choose people from the electoral roll at random. That's what they're proposing. But of course, the vast majority of people in this country have no idea about the Constitution because they've never been taught about the Constitution. It's not a subject that's taught in schools anymore. Hasn't been taught in schools for 40 or 50 years. And so nobody really has any concept of what they are about to lose. They have no understanding of the difference between the British Constitution and in fact, other common law constitutions and the European way of doing things.
Do you think by randomly choosing people from public, do you think that's a good way of maybe sidestepping people who actually do understand the Constitution, people who maybe are lay people but are well read?
Well, I have no problem with them choosing. I mean, I think people are generally intelligent enough to get the issues. The question is, are they going to be told? And I don't believe they are. And this is my issue. Who are the experts going to be that are brought in to present to these people?
That was going to be my next point. So if you're purposely selecting particular advisors, then you've got this basically controlled aspect of it, don't you? And then on this side here, you're randomly selecting members of the public who probably have no experience or understanding of any constitutional sort of issues such as property rights, spiritual rights, and so forth. Then it's quite a dangerous mix. It's almost like throwing lambs to the wolves, really.
Extremely dangerous mix, and of course that's what's intended.
Indeed.
Okay, where are we? Let's see. Yes, move on to France. Now, as you may know, since the Charlie Hebdo attack, François Hollande put 10,000 troops onto French streets in order to protect what they're calling sensitive sites, and the image there at the Eiffel Tower. So you can't go to look at your various great sites in France without this kind of thing going. Reminds me of Northern Ireland in many ways. So he is now reducing that to 7,000, but these 7,000 are now going to be permanent patrol sites. It's no longer a temporary situation. They have, well, what more can I say, really? 3,000 less troops on the streets. They are guarding synagogues as well as tourist sites and other sensitive landmarks. So we keep that. We have to look at this in the context of the militarization, really, of the police, I think, in Europe and in Britain and in the United States, and look at the kind of brutality that's going on in the United States at the moment with the various protesters. And I'm sure many of you have seen the videos of journalists having some kind of, I don't know whether it was salt being shot at them by the police, obviously wanting to get rid of journalists before they took whatever action they were going to take. This build up, this militarization of what was traditionally a civilian role is pretty dangerous, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Right. I wanted to highlight David Cameron here. I'm not going to say too much about this other than he just never fails to make me squirm. By raising the personal allowance, of course he's talking about tax, we'll lift another 500,000 under 30s out of income tax so you can keep more of what you earn. Well, that's a whoopee-doo, that's brilliant. He is bragging about how many people in this country are low paid. Yeah. So what he's saying here is we're going to, what is the personal allowance at the moment, £10,000 or something. Yeah. They're going to lift that to what, 11 or 12,000 pounds. So what he's saying is that by lifting the personal allowance by another £1,000 or £2,000, that'll be 500,000 people out of income tax. So 500,000 people under 30 on pretty low incomes there.
Yeah, very low incomes, yeah.
Yeah, just typical arrogance here. Brilliant, he thinks. RBS, yes, sadly the taxpayer-owned bank, as the Telegraph here pointing out, has set aside a load of money, just as we mentioned with Barclays the other day. And unfortunately this has meant that they have suffered a loss for the first quarter of this year. So £850 million set aside for foreign exchange and mortgage-backed securities mis-selling fines. Now, just to remind people about the mortgage-backed securities, these scandals. We've got PPI, we've got the interest rate swap scandal, we've got mortgage-backed securities, illegal activity, we've got foreign exchange manipulation. Where does it end? And as I'm just going to say it again, we need to split these banks up so that the pressure put on the commercial banks by the investment wings of those banks doesn't encourage this kind of activity. And Glass-Steagall is the legislation that should be the model for that. Let's call for it again. Any comments?
No, same. It's business as usual, isn't it, with banks? I mean, they create things out of thin air. They can manipulate things as they will. So we're being led to believe.
Indeed,
it's a banking world.
Right. Now, Justin Walker had planned to be on the programme today, but unfortunately he was not on Skype by the time we were ready to go on air. And because Nick still isn't back in the office, I'm not able to get him on, even if he has managed to get himself in the right place. But this was an article that he wanted to cover, and so I'm just going to mention it because this is John Deere, the tractor maker, who is claiming that if you buy one of their tractors, in fact, you don't own it, that they own it. And in fact, what you're buying is a persistent lease on it, effectively. Yeah, sort of you're borrowing it from them until... And the excuse that they're using for this is intellectual property, copyright, patents on software. So the modern tractor has computers in it, and the computers run software or firmware. And they are saying that because that firmware is theirs and may not be changed, amended, touched in any way, and because they own the patents on the copyright and the intellectual property on it, therefore, because it's on that tractor, that you no longer own that tractor or never owned that tractor in the first place. Absolutely incredible situation, and probably fits in very well with the PayPal issue, which has been raised by Paul Joseph Watson on InfoWars. Where he's pointing out a clause that PayPal intends to introduce into their terms and conditions in June or July, I think, this year. And the clause says, when providing us with content or posting content, in each case for publication, whether online or offline, using the services, you grant the PayPal Group a non-exclusive, worldwide, perpetual, irrevocable, royalty-free, sub-licensable, through multiple tiers, right to exercise any and all copyright, publicity, trademarks, database rights and intellectual property rights you have in the content in any media known now or in the future. Further, to the fullest extent permitted under applicable law, you waive your moral rights and promise not to assert such rights against the PayPal Group, its sub-licensees or assignees. You represent and warrant that none of the following infringe any intellectual property right: your provision of content to us, your posting of content using the services, and the PayPal Group's use of such content, including the works derived from it in connection with the services. Now, Paul Joseph Watson was really saying, I think he was going a little bit too far in what he was saying, because what it says here, basically this clause begins with, when providing us with content. So it involves giving content to PayPal in some way, and it goes on to say, your provision of content to us. So I phoned PayPal's media team and asked them for comment on this, and I phoned them, I believe, 4 days ago, and they haven't been able to answer yet. And I'm finding this very, very interesting because, as I say, I initially thought that perhaps Paul Joseph Watson was going a bit overboard, but because he was basically suggesting that PayPal was claiming rights to your content on your web server if you were using PayPal services. But I have to say, the PR, the very nice PR lady, came back to me today, and she was very unsure of herself. I asked a specific question. I asked for clarification of this clause. I asked for her to get clarification from PayPal because it's a third-party PR company that provides all the media services to PayPal. And she came back to me with no official PayPal response, and basically wasn't able to tell me the circumstances under which this clause applies, right? So my concern about this was that perhaps, because it says, when providing us with content, your provision of content to us, the only time I ever provide content to PayPal is if they ask for identification, personal documents, bank statements, driving licenses, passports. And I thought that would be in itself a pretty serious infringement of civil liberties and privacy. But it's just the John Deere story and this story, whatever this story turns out to be, and it may be nothing. I think it's not nothing because she wasn't able to give me an answer today and she's had to go back to them again. This absolutely is part of this corporatized, we run the world attitude of these corporations, and you will do what we say. And because we have tantamount to a monopoly position, you must use our service. It's staggering, isn't it?
Yeah, we've almost kind of we as a group of people, and I talk about everybody really. We've sort of sleptwalked into this really, haven't we? Because I mean, if you ask the general public, like anybody really, do they sit like for the sort of half an hour that's required to read the terms and conditions when registering for a product or signing anything? The emphatic answer is, of course, no. In those clauses, there's always that little clause that we reserve the right to add to this policy at any time we see fit. And the amount of times I've in the past where in the days where I did have a bank account, the bank would write to you and they'd say, oh, well, by the way, we're changing this about your policy.
Yeah.
Whoever writes back to say, no, I don't agree with that, I want to stick with my old policy. So few people do that. Most of us, we just accept it.
Well, the bank would close your account at that point.
Not if you've got an original agreement. Then unless it's stipulated in their clause, which most clauses do now, because I do so often sit and read these policies. Most contracts do now state that they can terminate that contract at any point, at any time for their own personal wishes, without having to tell you why they're terminating it. So of course they could do that, but nonetheless, if we just continue to accept these policies just for the fact that we can use things like Facebook, etc., then we kind of we are. We get what we deserve. Yeah. We get what you deserve. If the devil says to you, "Well, you can have this, but I want every single thing that you want, that you've got," well, if you stick with that agreement, then that's kind of your own downfall, isn't it?
It's the old contract at the crossroads.
Yeah, well, indeed. But I think we are sleepwalking to a world where we're going to literally own nothing at the end of the day.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Yeah. Secret courts should be opened up. So this is the Court of Protection.
This is the Court of Protection. It's an article from the Daily Mail. It's basically following a major legal report which has been produced by Cardiff University, their School of Law, and it stipulated that the controversial and secretive Court of Protection should be opened up to public scrutiny. And of course, that's in the interest.
Does this apply to adults or children or both?
I believe this is mainly applying to people who lack capacity under the Mental Health Act. So basically, the study follows discussions that's been happening amongst judges and lawyers recently, and they're calling basically for a media presence in the hearings. The Court of Protection, of course, was introduced by Tony Blair's government, and it is part of and sort of pushed under the Mental Capacity Act. That act in itself, I think, is quite controversial because it's very difficult to determine, different levels of mental capacity, and of course, if you're someone who's opposing certain, draconian measures or whatever, you might be deemed as having a lack of mental capacity, which obviously falls very nicely for the government's interests. In its earlier stages, of course, Lord Falconer, who was the first Lord Chancellor, expressed that the court would be open to the public, but then, of course, he changed his mind, and ever since then, the general rule is that the hearings are held in private. So basically, what the reporters have said, as I said, is they're calling for journalists to be able to be present in cases, which is very similar to the family courts. However, in family courts, of course, the judges can override anything which is being published or any information which is going to be published by newspapers. So, in a sense, it's kind of a little bit redundant, the fact that we're asking the University of Cardiff is asking for this, because if a judge can overrule it anyway, then it's kind of it's a little bit redundant, because in those special cases where they don't want people to know what's going on, they'll just say, well, we're making this ruling that this information can't be brought to the public. So I wonder if this is a lot of noise just to make us feel like our justice system is something's being done, even though nothing really is. And
what's this, ethnic cleansing?
Ethnic cleansing, it ties in a little bit with what you were talking about earlier, with David Cameron being so generous to raise 500,000 people out of the poverty bracket. This is an article by The Independent. It's actually one of the most interesting articles I've read today, because there wasn't a huge amount else around in The Independent, but or other than what you've covered already. But basically, according to the investigation, which is led by The Independent, more than 50,000 families have been moved out of London boroughs in the past 3 years. The move has been dubbed as social cleansing by this newspaper and other commentators.
Social cleansing?
Social cleansing,
right.
Yeah. The cleansing is a result of, cleansing brackets, is a result of welfare cuts and rising rents and higher taxes, such as the introduction of the bedroom tax. Support groups are claiming that families are being uprooted further from the capital, away from relatives and support networks, with some families going as far as Manchester and Bradford, which is quite a long way, I think, for people who have got family networks in London. Official figures, which authorities have previously refused to publish, show the problem is much worse than campaigners feared, with numbers continuing to rise, with around 500 families a week being moved from the capital, which is quite a number, I think. Tom Copley, who is a Labour member of the London Assembly and Deputy Chair of the Housing Committee, warned that London was being, quote, hollowed out, And he said, "I'm appalled by these figures. This is social cleansing on an unprecedented scale."
So we have the Independent has published this.
Yep, which is basically showing us how the people are being displaced across the country and at what rates. I think it's quite phenomenal, really. I mean, I think London is really heading towards a city for the super rich. They're obviously moving people out. I was checking what kind of sort of ethnicities are being moved. It's a broad set of ethnicities. I don't think it's really focusing on any sort of group. It is just simply moving out those people that can't afford to pay. It does make you wonder whether, when the bedroom tax was introduced, whether this was something that was going to be planned for the future, which was back then.
I mean, this is something that's absolutely happened in Plymouth, in the Devonport area, for example, where there were multi-generational families living in that and had been living there for 4 generations, and suddenly they decided that they were going to move all those people away, demolish those houses, and build modern flats instead, which or modern apartments, which of course couldn't accommodate those people back again. So those communities absolutely split up, and I think again this is just about splitting up community and making sure that there is no cohesive community that people can feel like they belong to.
And I suppose we've got future development programs that are heading our way as well, and you can't really develop areas when there are people living there. So I think we have to kind of move them out as well, don't we?
And finally, then.
Finally, this is an article from The Express. Driven mad, now EU wants UK drivers to pay 370 million. Accident alert. So basically what really is happening here is that as of 2018, the European Union wants to put devices into our vehicles so that if there is a collision, of course we can't say accident anymore, so if there's a collision, the authorities will be notified straight away.
Does it specify which authorities?
Yes, it does. Accident and emergency authorities. That, of course, will include police. It will include ambulances. Whether a fire service will be automatically called, I think that would be kind of a waste of time. I kind of hope that that's not going to be the case. But it will. This initiative will extend to buses, coaches, and trucks after 2021. The cost is going to be passed on to motorists, obviously, with car manufacturers have been calling for this for a long time, so they're hoping to maybe make a little slice of the profit for themselves. I'm interested with the data that's going to be gathered, because in order to notify authorities about who's had the accident, who was in the car, and they're talking about what fuel you use, what type of car you've got. Obviously, that data is going to have to be stored somewhere in order for that machine to send that information there in the first place.
Is this going to be another function of DVLA, or is this going to be privately run?
I didn't actually pick that up in the article. I don't think it's going to be. I don't actually know. I wouldn't like to comment on that, to be totally honest.
That might be interesting to find out, because we already know from articles at the end of last year that DVLA making multiple millions of pounds from selling on drivers' data, and so somebody is going to make a fortune from this.
No doubt, somebody's going to make an absolute killing. That £370 million, which is coming from Britain alone, is going to go somewhere, obviously. I think again another sub issue of this is really about more surveillance in our vehicles. It's the first, well, not first, but another nudge, another little step towards having most likely cameras and audio equipment in the cars and so forth, and having complete control before we go to automated motoring. I think
smart motorways,
smart vehicles, and that sort of thing. I think this is because, as always, it's always done under the guise of health and safety. So be interesting
of course,
to see where this goes.
In parallel with this, the insurance companies, attempting to get people to accept this voluntarily and consent to it through their, get £150 off your insurance by running this little mobile app,
or a black box,
or a black
which
box.
they're talking about. And also interesting with the cameras as well. There was an article in the Daily Mail, of course. There was an article a few days ago, and it was talking about people now putting their mobile phones and using them as cameras on the front dashboard, because it's helping them in insurance claims. But as you pointed out when we were discussing that earlier, with the knowledge now that Android phones can start recording information like audio and visually without people knowing, it does make you wonder.
Well, it is interesting.
Who's listening to your car?
I've just renewed my car insurance, and of course I looked around, and I think this year for the first time, I certainly didn't notice it last year, I was asked, do you have a dashboard camera in the car? I was asked that, and So that's an interesting little development.
Interesting. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's us for today. Now, tomorrow, obviously, I'm going up to Nottingham. The plan is that Nick will come in and will attempt to do something in this 1 o'clock slot. But to be honest, it very much depends on what is happening at Nottingham, what people are all up to. So I can't promise that we're absolutely going to do something at 1 o'clock, but we're going to aim to do that. So please come along and see if we do. And if not, we will certainly be recording everything that goes on up there, and we'll talk about it on Monday. Hope to see as many of you as possible tomorrow, and if not, we will see you on Monday at the usual time. Not sure what day next week Brian gets back. I think it's Tuesday or Wednesday. But in the meantime, hope you all have a good weekend, and those that I see tomorrow, look forward to meeting you then.
Yeah, that's for me. Thank
Okay,
you very much.
bye-bye.